And now I will switch to English, and Jason, I just told him about the group session, which I already told you about. And so, Jason Roberts, originally from Texas, Dallas, and where you also live today. And you've made this the Better Block idea, which has become like a huge community and huge organization, and also idea, not only in Dallas, but many places in the world. And you've been in Copenhagen for the past 48 hours. You've been here before as well. So we look very much forward to hearing about your ideas, and also maybe in a Nordic and Danish context. Please welcome Jason.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me okay, too? Okay. Again, my name's Jason Roberts from Dallas, Texas. I tend to talk a little fast, so I'm going to try not to do that so much. In Texas, we usually talk slow, but for some reason, that didn't happen for me. So, I started a firm called Team Better Block back in 2011 with one of my good friends, based on these ideas of fixing places rapidly with our communities. But real fast, to talk about my background, I did not start off as an urban planner or an architect or anything like that. I actually worked in rooms that looked like this. I fixed computers for a living. I was the guy that probably would have been setting up these wires and things like that. So I was a pretty boring guy during the day. But at night, the one cool thing I had going for me was I played in a rock band. So that way I had a little bit of an exciting nighttime for me. A lot of my ideas on places, though, and fixing places and making places better came from actually visiting Europe and seeing a lot of the things that you guys were doing in places like this, or places like Rome, where I saw these great old fountains and markets that were active and alive with young people and old people. Going up to like Amsterdam, and again here in Copenhagen, and seeing people bicycle, grandparents, grandkids together. These old buildings that had been continually being reused with new businesses for the area. So I came back to Dallas, and I thought, well, what are we doing? What's going to be our legacy like you guys have done in your communities? What's going to be the thing that we hand down to our future generations? And I saw a lot of these things. And it was really frustrating for me in my community because we were spending billions of dollars on these things, and I couldn't figure out where I was going to ride my bicycle, or how I was going to have my cup of coffee here, or and how we were going to develop along the edges. And then beyond that, we had done a lot of planning. People were talking about all the great things that could happen in our city, but people said it was too hot there, so we probably couldn't have an outdoor life. We have a car culture, and we'd done all of these plans, the 2035 mobility plan, and Forward Dallas, and Downtown Dallas, but nothing was really getting built based on these plans. It was just a lot of talk. And then beyond that, whenever I started bringing up ideas of like, hey, let's do great things like we see in Copenhagen and in Paris and other places like that, a lot of people stopped and said, we can't do anything different. We can't change. We had a lot of fear about doing anything different from the status quo in our communities. So one of the big projects that I got involved with that taught me about how I should, why the existing processes weren't working was we did a design charrette where we went out into our community, and we all took maps and we drew pictures with architects and planners where we spent tens of thousands of dollars as a city to talk about how we make places better. The problem was everybody came up with the worst case scenarios and how bad things could possibly be. And so if you look at that same, what happened from this project we did in 2009, that street today looks like this. Still a place that nobody would want to be. Not very few people want to set up a business here. It's cold, it's uninviting, it's very sterile, very gray. So I knew something had to change. A lot of my ideas were based on how could I fix these places in days, not years, and with very little money, using a lot of people. One of the big things I had to learn too was I had to stop just being a cheerleader and just talking about wouldn't it be great if we had these good things and good places, and actually being a champion. Actually start doing the work a little bit more, filling out the applications, talking to my city officials, talking to the business leaders in my neighborhood. So one of the first projects I took on was an old building I had in my a few blocks from where I live. This is called the Texas Theater. If any of you know about JFK and the history of JFK, it's fairly famous. This is where Lee Harvey Oswald was captured. So just a few blocks from where I live, but it had been closed down for 10 years. There was a group that was trying to raise millions of dollars to fix it up again, but they were having a lot of trouble doing that. The only reason it even had a sign was because Oliver Stone did the movie JFK there, so he built a sign for us, but it was all out of wood and it was falling apart. So looking at this and thinking, okay, I can't really raise millions of dollars to fix this thing. How can I get it working how can I get it working in days and get people in there and get it back online again? I found an artist in New York that I thought did some great work. He went out the day before he had an art show. He'd go to a gallery, he'd fill it up with 100 blank canvases, and then the day before, so that night before, he's painting all of these canvases, and the next day, he would open up the doors, and everyone would come into this art show. So I learned from this that, like, okay, I can have one person can create an art gallery overnight with 100 pieces. Now, I probably can't find one guy that could do 100 pieces like that in my community, but I might be able to find 100 artists to do one piece each, right? So I did that. This is the inside of that old building, the theater itself. It had been closed for 10 years. The air conditioning wasn't working. Plumbing was having issues. But we started building these easels. We invited these artists out to the area. And then a few minutes before we're about to open the doors, we thought, this is going to be a horrible failure, actually. It's in the middle of winter. It's in a theater that's been closed for 10 years. We're on the bad side of town. People don't like coming to this part of town. It's called Oak Cliff. But what happened when we opened the doors was we had 700 people show up. We sold every piece of art that night as well, and we gave all that money to a local charity. But beyond that, I had people come out and say, we've been waiting for someone to do something with this old building. We're so glad it's online again. We're so glad we're going to take part in this. And beyond that, I had people that showed up that said, how can we keep doing things here? They started taking over the theater, showing old movies again and other great things. Now the theater is back online. It's working. We haven't raised the millions of dollars yet to fix it, but it's working as is, and it's an anchor for the area. So kind of drunk with excitement and thinking, if I can fix an old building, what else can I do in the area? I had some property owners that came to me, and they said, we need to get more businesses coming here. We need to have more activity happening, but people are scared of this side of town, and we have a lot of empty buildings and nothing really going on. And they talked about different ideas on bringing more activity to my part of town. And they asked me what I would do. And I found these old maps in my community. And those old black bold lines, those were our old tram, our old streetcar system. And most major cities in the world had streetcars or trams. You guys had one until 1973. We had ours until 1956. It ran for 50 years. So I said, why don't we bring the streetcar back? That'll be our project. And they said, that's a horrible idea. It'll never happen. You can't bring a streetcar back. It's been gone for 50 years. And again, nobody wants to do those kind of things here. I didn't know anything about streetcars, but I did, again, I was a computer guy. I knew about websites. So that night I went home and I built a website called the Oak Cliff Transit Authority. It looked really official, right? Had about pages and board and news and history. I had a European trolley on the front page as well. And then the next week, the local newspaper came out and said, dreaming of the day the streetcars return. That's what Jason Roberts and other members of the recently formed Oak Cliff Transit Authority are hoping. But there were no other members. So this was just really me trying to get a project going to inspire the community that we could do great things here. But what happened was I had really great people reach out to me and say, we want to help. How can we take part? I had civil engineers in my community say, we will donate our time to doing a study. I had streetcar enthusiasts come out and say, I know how to work on these things, so we want to help as well. So I had a legitimate streetcar organization starting to work now. So while I'm working on this, I also started studying your cities and Portland and New York and other great places. And I saw that they were doing great things with public transit, but they were also doing great bike infrastructure as well. But the thing is, in Dallas, whenever we talked about bicycling, it was always this kind of sweaty, wearing spandex and long distance riding. It wasn't what you guys were doing, where it was like girls in dresses and guys in suits. We just didn't do that. So I decided to say, well, why don't we start our own bicycling group similar to the streetcar effort? While I've got this going on, and we'll call it Bike Friendly Oak Cliff. We'll promote riding old, heavy bikes, just like they do in Copenhagen. We thought maybe we'd have 20 people come out to our first ride whenever we announced that we're going to do this. We actually had 150 people show up. And I decided to take them all on a tour of come to my community and we'll follow the trail of Lee Harvey Oswald because we had nothing else to celebrate. The amazing thing was I didn't own a bicycle when I started Bike Friendly Oak Cliff. I just loved the idea of having a bike culture. And what you don't see is me at the front of this line because I'm terrified because I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I shouldn't be leading a movement like this. But what I tell people now, if you're passionate about something, you have everything it takes to start leading major projects in your community. Okay. And then the amazing thing was I started focusing simple ideas on changing the culture in the area. So I had a school that had no kids riding bicycles. I decided to make punch cards. So kids could just, if you rode your bike to school for a week, you got punch cards every day and would give you a prize at the end of the week. After 5 days, we had 100 kids bicycling. So we went from 0 to 100. So we were able to show in simple ways how we could change the culture of the community. And then we had local bike shops start to open that were working now because we had promoted this idea within our community. We had bike lanes start getting built and all of the great things occurring. Okay, so while I'm working on this old theater and the streetcar and the bicycle group, I'm also looking at these old buildings. I've got entire blocks of buildings that have been vacant for years. I looked at these and I thought, okay, well, right now there's zoning. We have zoning that says I'm not allowed to have retail in here, which makes no sense to me. We turned these streets into one-way, high-speed streets, so people couldn't go slow enough to see the old storefronts. The sidewalks were thinned, and I had no landscaping. And it's really kind of a dismal-looking area. And beyond that, the city had created all these ordinances. And you guys don't have to read all these, but basically that said, to do anything great would be very expensive. If I wanted to put flowers on the sidewalk, it was $1,000. If I wanted to put shade awnings out, it was $1,000. Outdoor cafes, $1,000 per year. I couldn't put merchandise on the sidewalk, and you weren't allowed to have people gather outside. So there's no way to have a great street life whenever I have all of these rules, right? So I looked at that street and thought, well, obviously we're not legally allowed to do anything to make this the place I wish it was. So what if we took a weekend and broke every law we possibly could, right, to make a great place? And we did. We painted our own bike lanes. We added our own outdoor cafe seating, our own historic lighting. We took those vacant buildings we worked with the local property owners on and said, hey, these have been empty for years. Can we open them for 2 days and just create our own businesses that we want in these areas? And we did. We created coffee shops, flower shops, art galleries. We took all those rules we were breaking and we printed them and put them in the windows. And then we invited the city staff and council members out and said, come out and enjoy the party that we're having. And at that point, they came out and they started reading that we were breaking all these rules and they thought, what are we doing here? But what happened afterwards, they said, when we thought we'd get into a lot of trouble, but we'd start a conversation, they actually came back and said, you know what, we should have retail in these places. We shouldn't have all these strange rules like this as well. Actually, those rules have been on the books since 1941. We don't know why we do them anymore, actually. So what happened through this project was we actually got the rules changed within weeks. We got the zoning changed in the area within weeks as well. These things typically take years in our city, but by just demonstrating with the community how we can make these things, we can make them stick. And beyond that, we had some of the businesses stay too, which was my ulterior motive. I wanted to have these businesses in my community anyways, and I wanted to be able to walk to them. This is one of the businesses. It's called Oil and Cotton. It's the anchor for this area. Not only that, they actually donate to all of my projects that I do from here on out in the community. So not only did we seed a business that's active and working, we also have a benefactor. And those buildings, again, that were all vacant. This is just weeks before we started the project. Within weeks after we finished, they were all leased, and now they're retail establishments. So again, we thought, okay, we can do that in one street, but let's take another street that also has the same issues. But everyone said that first project you did was in the spring. It was nice outside. But what if you tried something when it was hot? So we decided, let's go take a street where it's 40 degrees Celsius out, in the early September. So we did another project that was a gray street, no sidewalks on one side, broken sidewalks on the other. I've got a pole with nothing on it. I've got businesses that are failing regularly in the area. So we took this street and said, how can I make this a place that people would want to come and stay and spend money and enjoy the area in? So what I did was I worked with some landscape architects and we brought out 42 trees. We brought out 100 bushes to actually kind of slow the streets down so people could see the businesses better. We took old wood that we had behind shipping container areas, and we built our own decks as well. We painted our own crosswalks. You're not supposed to do that, but and we took the poles and we put bicycles on them, so because we're trying to promote this bicycle culture in our community. Beyond that, we were told it was too hot in our community and people wouldn't sit outside and enjoy the spaces. But what happened was when we created the shade and we made it inviting with tables and chairs, people did come out and they stayed out. And they spent money and they called their friends and said, please come out here and enjoy this great street we have. And beyond that, the city is now working with us to make these trees permanent and to also make this street more vibrant and alive. One of the major issues we faced was we had a lot of architects and consultants that came out to our community and said, drew pictures and showed us AutoCAD drawings and great things like that, but we were getting what we called rendering fatigue. We'd seen so many drawings and so many ideas of how great places could be. We just took that same energy and we actually built the place ourselves temporarily. So those aren't Photoshop trees, those are real. It's real crosswalks, real bicycles in the community. That same effort it took to draw pictures with high-end architects, we just did together as a community. And then the private businesses started getting it as well. After we finished up, before they had bars on their windows, so it felt unsafe. They had weeds overgrown in the area, and the sidewalk wasn't inviting. Once they saw what we were doing, the next week they started cleaning up the front facades. They took down the bars. They made it more inviting, and they added the outdoor seating as well. We had other buildings that had been vacant for years. Once we showed how they could be used, we made little pop-up businesses inside of them temporarily. They had graffiti again, weeds, mirrored glass. Within weeks after the project, these were leasing as well. This is a local beer and wine store that actually donates to all of our projects as well. Again, it had been vacant for years. And just by us testing an idea out for 2 days, it showed some local entrepreneurs in our area how they could make a business out of this space. So what we hit upon was this idea of doing things fast for very little money, using the resources that we had around us, and actually questioning the existing rules. That was a big deal for us to actually identify what the rules were now and why do we do those things, and give ourselves a challenge to break some rules for a couple of days to make a better place. I had a group that wanted to do a dog park in my community, and they talked to the city, and the city said, a dog park's going to take years, millions of dollars, a lot of studies, so it's going to take us a while to get this off the ground, and it's going to take a lot of land too. And this group came to me because they were frustrated. They said, well, what would you do? And I said, well, why don't we just build a dog park, a small one, and show the city how we can make a small one that we can manage, and we could do it across the street from where we're standing here in this area that people are throwing a lot of trash. It's not supposed to be a dumping ground, but it's become one, and it's lots of weeds, and it's overgrown. And they said, okay, that's great. We'll create a temporary dog park. We can have a lot of meetings. We'll do a lot of planning. We'll raise a lot of money and maybe create this thing in a few months. And I said, well, why don't we just do it next weekend? And so we did. We just mowed the grass. We created a fence because a dog park is just a fence. We added our swings for kids so kids could actually come out and play in the area. We added we added outdoor seating as well. The amazing thing about this project is now we have a permanent dog park in the neighborhood based on these pop-up dog parks we've been doing, and we keep doing more in the neighborhoods as well. So one of the big things we found in our community that was important for us was the city of Dallas had this motto of think big. That's how we're going to get things done. And that was typically we'll build one big project, a $100 million bridge or something like that. And I found actually the places that we love around the world actually are very small. It's whether it be in Copenhagen or Paris or New York, it's typically a block that you love and that you always go to, but it's got 100 little things, not one big thing. It's got a little deli, little cafe, little flower shop, little pocket park, public benches, some shade trees, and things like that. So as a community, I've learned we could build 100 little things together as opposed to trying just to get that one big thing. And then I also started seeing what was happening in the New York Times Square project and realized they had some great ideas and we should take some from some of these as well. So our ideas were, let's work fast. Let's not talk about doing things in years that take millions of dollars. How can we do things in days with very little funds? Also, how do we get out of the town halls and out of the city halls and into the street? And two of the big problems that I found that everybody said that we could fix anything, the problem is we just don't have enough money and the problems are too big. The reality that we found, and this is a quote we learned from a guy named Jamie Lerner, was that honestly, if you want innovation to occur, take a zero away from your budget. If you want ultimate innovation and sustainability to occur, take 2 zeros away from your budget. And the way we were able to do things whenever we started having to take zeros away from our budget was we actually started managing the equation of co-responsibility. We started bringing as many people, as many organizations, as many businesses into the mix and asked them to all own a part of this block and help us fix these things together. And so what we learned, like from the New York project, was real simple. They used simple things like chairs, paint, and planters to redesign a space that was formerly for cars. Again, they were told that this would never work. This is the crossroads to the world. You're going to hurt business and hurt all these things. What happened, businesses actually did better in the area. Accidents reduced. All kinds of great things started happening. And now it's a permanent project. This is an example of a project I had, again, where I had a group that was willing. This was an old sign that was in Virginia, that there was a block of buildings that were trying to get businesses in the area, but no businesses were really coming. The neighborhood came in and said, you know what, we'd like to light up this old sign that we have that's been turned off for 40 years. I found a philanthropy group that came out and said, you know what, we'll donate $10,000 to help light that sign. And I said, let's not do that, because if we just give the community the money, they're not going to understand why it's important for us to have this together. We want to have a shared ownership in the area so that everyone is telling the story on why this is important. I'd rather the community go out and do a car wash and all be talking about these things and helping us fix this together and all raising money together on this effort. Because we needed to have 400 light bulbs, new electrical panels, all kinds of things for this. By doing that, I actually mobilized the community in just a few days. We found a guy who had a crane that donated that to us. We found a group that had a light bulb business that gave us 400 light bulbs for free for the project. And we found an electrician who said, I want to help with electrical for this. And so what happened within days, this sign that had been off for 40 years that we were told was going to take $10,000 to fix, we fixed basically for free within a few days. So it became a beacon in the night back for the community again. I had other examples too where I had some developers in the area that had these old trucking warehouses, and they thought, you know what, we just want to tear these trucking warehouses down and try to hopefully do some development in the future. But we found that whenever we start tearing buildings down, oftentimes the capital takes years to come to actually make anything happen. So we talked to the property owners and said, why don't you let us use the building as is and show you what we could do with it now. So we did another art project in this. Again, another art conspiracy project. We took that trucking warehouse. We brought in hundreds of artists. We did another art show there. And because of this project and us showing how you could use the space as is, the property owner got it. And within a couple of years, he was able to retrofit that building. And now this is it today. It's a business. It's a restaurant incubator. It's got restaurants throughout. But that is the same building that you saw before underneath. Now that he was just going to tear down, and we were just going to wait for something to happen years in the future. So a lot of the tools we now use too are things that we can find online. We don't need high-dollar consultants or a lot of experts to come in and tell us how to fix a street. We found tools online that are available from groups like Code for America that communities can actually draw their streets and then for free draw in new designs, and we can go test them as the community and show how they'll work over a weekend. Then we also count, because we've been told that the cities want to have data on how things could improve, so we count speed tests, we count audible levels, and we count traffic counting and all kinds of things. I'm going to speed past this one here real fast, because look, we're almost out of time here. This real fast is just one other project we did. I had a better block going off to the side. I had a park, though, that nobody was using. I asked the community, why does nobody use this park? And they said, there's nothing to do there, and there's no kids here, really. So it's kind of worthless to us. So while I'm working on a better block project, I said, well, let me see if I can do something with this park. I'll take a couple of hours of my time. We found a bunch of old tires in the trash. We painted them a bunch of bright, crazy colors. I hung them in the trees, and within 20 minutes, kids came out of nowhere and started swinging in the area. So, and the newspapers came in and took all these pictures of these kids swinging, and we were able to show how the city could actually put a playground in this area that would actually activate this area better. Now, that Better Block project that we started back in 2010 just to fix my own neighborhood blocks, within a year started happening all over the U.S., And then the next year, it started going around the world and went as far as Australia and Tehran, Iran. And Iran, the guy who was heading that up asked me about breaking the rules. I said, I don't know about breaking the rules in Iran. That sounds iffy. Okay, and the last thing I want to show you here is this, going back to the streetcar project. Again, I just built a website. We're on the bad side of town. And the city, when we told them, like, hey, we want to start filling out some grants to try to bring this streetcar back, they said, go ahead, good luck, Oak Cliff Transit Authority. We'll see what happens. We had a 0.3% chance of getting any money to do anything. The interesting thing is, this is one of my friends, Scott Griggs, who helped us print out all those rules we were breaking for the first Better Block. He's now the city council member for our area, so you can break rules and become an elected official. And that's my friend Louis, who's actually who's the civil engineer that helped out. So what happened was we filled out these grant applications. We had a very dismal chance of getting any money at all. We actually won millions of dollars and brought the streetcar back. So the amazing thing, all I did was create a website. And we rallied a community around this effort. And beyond that, by just creating this streetcar effort and getting that on the ground, we actually had real new businesses coming to that area. These are new apartments that were just built last year, and these are will be online in the next 12 months as well, along the streetcar line. And this is the rail itself being put in the ground. So this is actually being developed, and I did this project just again as something to see if I could get more economics happening in the area. I use the same ideas in order to that I use to fix blocks and bicycles and streetcars to start businesses. So I've got a restaurant in my area that's based on the same ideas, and that's working and thriving. And then I started ran for U.S. Congress. I got to meet the First Lady. All these great things started happening based on these ideas. And I remember at the time thinking, like, nothing can stop me. I figured out these tricks in order to get things happening in my community. Like, what could possibly go wrong? And what actually went wrong for me was in 2012, I was diagnosed with stage 3 cancer. So everything stopped. And at that point, I started wondering, well, shoot, what did I do all this stuff for? I'm not even going to get a chance to ride the streetcar that I helped build. I'm not going to get a chance to see my kids grow up. This is pretty horrible. But what happened, I realized when I was trying to fix these communities and have things happening, what I was really doing was building a neighborhood and making a place that I wanted to live in. And what happened when I was really at my sickest, the neighborhood came out saw me building better blocks and said, let's do a Build a Better Jason campaign to help fix me. So, and so what really happened after all that was I learned how to create a better neighborhood that we could all rely on each other and help each other when we needed it. Now, in February last year, I was diagnosed as being cancer-free, so I'm okay now. Okay, so the 3 tricks I learned in order to get things done, and this is going to be it for me, was because people ask me, how did you get all these things done? I did these things in about a 5-year span, very short amount of time. First of all, I said show up. If you don't show up, she will, and she's opposed to everything, right? And you guys know who she is, I'm sure. Second of all, give your project a name. So, and focus on good design. So Art Conspiracy, we created Bike-Friendly Oak Cliff, the Oak Cliff Transit Authority. We have a property developer in our area, had a little set of buildings. He decided to call them the Bishop Arts District, so they became this entity that people love to talk about and champion. So give your projects a name that people can respond to and talk about and celebrate. And lastly, set a date and publish it. I call it blackmail yourself. I set short dates for all our projects, 30 days usually, no more than 90 days though. And what I tell people is I focus more on the poster and the design, like I did the website. I put it out there and I say, hey, we're going to do this Better Block project. And people say, how are you going to get that done? I'm like, I have no idea. But what happens is all these resources kind of come together and that help me get these things done. I found if I set long dates, like we're going to do this in a year or 2, we'll start talking ourselves out of it. We'll come up with all the problems that are going to occur, and we won't make anything happen at all. So it's been important for me to actually do this short time frames and activate my community together to make a better place. And that's it for me. Thanks, guys.
So fantastic, Jason, and congratulations on beating cancer. That's fantastic.
Yes.
Great. It's great news.
Thank you.
And so any immediate questions for Jason? Of course, I have one. But any immediate questions before group session? please raise your hand. And then in the meanwhile, I'll ask you, like, some of the streets, some of your first projects where you kind of turned a dead street over to a living street, how are they doing today?
Sure. Well, since we got the zoning changed and other things happening now, you see more businesses happening in the area. The private side can work a lot faster than the public side, so the private businesses have stayed. We get new businesses now in the area, and it's become a really trendy spot now, where those first better blocks were. But beyond that, we're seeing now public investment happen. We're having the street changes be made permanently. Those things take a little longer because cities just don't work as fast. But
so you think the problem back then was all the rules against doing things, or more that there weren't any business opportunities? People weren't bringing a business because there weren't any people buying stuff in that area?
I think it was a little of both.
Okay.
Yeah, and so what I was just trying to do was show, I just selfishly wanted to have a place that I could go walk out my door and have a cup of coffee and go to a flower shop and hang out with my son. And so really I just created the place I always wanted to have that I saw happening all over the world. And what happened was I found out that people living in my community all wanted the same thing too. And that by just helping create that temporary vision together, it made a lot of those things stick permanently because we showed people how we can make these things work together.
And then the whole thing about it's better to say sorry or than ask permission. Yeah. Would you say that apply pretty much everywhere when you deal with this better blocks?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where when we work with cities, we've learned not to tell them everything we're doing, because if we tell them everything, then they'll say, hey, you can't do this, and this. We just go in and we say, look, we're just going to do an event. And it's going to be temporary. We're going to test some ideas out here. We have no idea if this is going to work or it's not going to work. We just want to try some things because nothing is working right now. And so anything we do is going to make it better. So that was really kind of what we were focusing on.
And then the whole financial part of it. I mean, when it comes down to it, in order to get the streetcar back, you need money in order to get new buildings or fixing the theater, the old Texas theater. You do need money. Where in the equation does money occur in your philosophy? So
it's interesting, but I found that even when you don't have the money, just having the conversation, whenever I just started saying we're going to bring a streetcar back and we're an organization that's going to do this, we had people come to our community that started showing the newspapers to their banks and their investors and saying, look, there's a streetcar effort going on. And the banks would start giving more money to new businesses in our area. So just the conversation actually spurred investment. So yeah, what I found though is I could either have places be vacant for years and just hope something's going to happen, or I can do something with them right now with the existing community. And what happens whenever I use it right now, especially with old buildings, they don't do well if they're not lived in, because they start falling apart even faster. It was best for me to have something happening, no matter what it was. And then once people saw that it was usable and that we could go to it fairly regularly, consistently, the right people came out and said, hey, I want to help. How can I take part? And once we had those people, it wasn't hard for us to kind of have a management group to manage that, and then them to bring in funds they had. All right.
Cool. Well, if no hands are showed, then we're going to start the group session, and we'll only do it for 5 minutes when I say go.